You're here on C Major Before the Show. It's the second Saturday in May. Thank you so much for tuning in. We're glad to have you here. Yes, I'm very excited about today's topic because we're talking about black keys today. And so I've decided to call today's episode Two Black Dogs Learning to Play Black Keys. And I think it's because I do favor dogs over cats. So if you are more of a cat person, you may think of two black keys as two black cats or something else. We'll say a little bit more about that as we get into today's episode. You're listening to C Major Before the Show. I'm your host, C Major Porter. So glad to be with you on this Saturday here in the greater New York area. Today's lesson is an interesting one. We can approach piano playing in terms of black and white. It may not matter to you, but think about how to start playing using the groups of two black keys. So we'll cover this and more on today's episode. I'm glad that you're here. How are you doing? Did you have a good week? I hope so. It's been a trying time for a lot of my friends and family, and just going about our day-to-day activities has been a challenge. As you know, and you may see from some of my social media posts, I do work in coffee culture as well as in music. I believe that the two belong together, and so I've tried to bridge the two in my life, and it's two things that I really enjoy doing. I love being a barista, and I love being a piano teacher. I love being a performing artist. So to me, coffee and music are really my life. So I just wish you the best as you try to navigate these times, and let us know how we can help you through that. Last week we talked about fingers having numbers. It's important to note that keys do not have numbers. There are a certain number of keys on your keyboard. It doesn't matter how you count them. You'll get a particular number. So if you have a keyboard that has 88 keys, you can start in the middle and start counting, and you will get to that number, 88. 76 keys, 61 keys, 49 keys, etc. Doesn't matter. But what does matter is how you're able to locate the black keys. Now, having said that, some keyboards do come with black keys in groups of 2s and 3s only. And if you have an 88 key keyboard or piano, you will see that one lone black key down to your left. And some of my students get a little confused about that. They're just wondering, why is it just hanging out? I'm sure there's a mathematical explanation for that. But today's episode is devoted to getting you started by playing the black keys. So if you're like me, you didn't start with black keys, you started with white keys, because back in the day, that's how piano teachers taught. They taught using the middle C approach. So that meant you started with white keys, and you may or may not have acknowledged the black keys at all. Some of my musician friends who don't read music, they think the black keys means that you're playing sharps and flats. And so I like to think in terms of naming the keys once we've dealt with the whole white-black key issue. So let's deal with that today. Now, last week I did say something about the black keys without Fergie. And it was meant to be humorous. As you all know, if you know anything about Fergie, you know she's with the Black Eyed Peas, not the Black Keys. But it was a humorous remark. We try to have fun and to find funny things to talk about here on the podcast. So I'm sure you knew I meant the Black Eyed Peas as a reference to her. But today, we're going to have fun with the Black Keys on the piano. So let's jump into that. Now, it doesn't matter which method you have. I'm going to just refer to a couple of things that I have in front of me. And then I'm going to talk with you about some fun things you can do with us on the internet. So if you have a method book in front of you, after there may be a discussion about finger numbers, after there may be a discussion about rhythm and music, or even clapping rhythm, you may finally get to the keys. And then, of course, there's going to be some discussion about how to play those keys. Now, we're not talking about that today. We're not talking about the approach to playing the keys. So if I play a black key on my piano, how am I doing that? So after we talk about the twos, we'll talk about the threes, and then we'll talk about putting those together, and then we'll go from there. So some methods will start out by saying, okay, just to get used to the piano, play any low black key. But they don't really say start with any low black key of a two black key group. So now we're going to look at another method that talks about that. So again, I entitled today's episode Two Black Dogs for a reason, because I like dogs. Not that I don't like cats, but you'll see in some of the methods, they may even list something like animals as a way to describe black keys, such as ants or something else. I've even seen a method where they refer to the black keys as birds. So either way, we're talking about the two black key group. So you'll see on your keyboard that the keyboard is divided into groups. I want you to just focus on the twos. So one way to approach it would be to play it with just fingertips, play with just finger pads. But for now, if you're at a keyboard, or if you will be at one later, just do me a favor and just touch all of the two black keys. And you can start in the middle, you can start up high, you can start lower. It doesn't matter to me. I'll start in the middle. So if I start in the middle, it's going to sound like this, right? If I go down lower, it's going to sound like this. Or if I play them one at a time, it's going to sound like that. Or if I could decide to start from right to left and then go down. So I don't really have a preference for how you're going to do this. I like using the different methods that are out there to form my own teaching method. So I have a combination of ways that I can teach, and it really depends on the learning style of the student. So if I can see that I have a student that really likes movement, we can do a lot of fun things at the piano. And so if I have a student that's more visual, then I'll probably do more pointing and talking. And then if I have one that is very sensitive to sound, I may have that student look away from the keyboard as they play, to just listen or maybe close their eyes. So what we're going to do is, on the C Major Radio Show, we'll actually write down some visuals to help you with this. So I hope you will join us over there a little bit later. Now let's say if you talk in terms of dogs, what do dogs do? Some dogs jump, right? Some dogs bark. Some dogs paw at things. You could think about the action of a dog to describe how you would approach playing the two black keys. How could you make your actions look like and sound like that of a dog, for instance? And then what about a cat? How could you make your playing on the two black keys sound like two cats, for instance? I think I saw something where they were suggesting having two cats meow together as in a conversation. If you're talking about ants, you may think about how ants crawl or how they feel. If you're thinking about birds, you may think, how can I play this so that it sounds more like birds chirping? When I was a young girl, I had a relative that would always talk to me about the birds and how it sounded like they were saying something in particular. A particular word, like the birds are talking to us. And so that's always fun too. So you can always think about your posture, your fingering a little bit later, your hand shape. We won't get into that. But I would almost be tempted to say, once you've decided if you're going to think of your two black keys as dogs or cats or ants or birds or something else, think about the sound that you will make. Because I think you can start with artistry really early on. How will I play those black keys? Will I play them quietly? Will I play them loudly? So there's a lot you can do. And you can create patterns. So there's a lot to do with black keys. You know, I pay attention to a lot of things online, and one of the things I was really fascinated with this week was at the Math Museum. They were talking about young children learning numbers and learning about numbers, and how they could start with two numbers and then realize they can use those same two numbers but reverse the order of those numbers and still get a same result in terms of addition. I thought that was so cool. I didn't know that young students would get excited about something like that. But think about piano. If you combine the two black keys in any way, shape, or form, would you always get the same sound result? And I would say no. That there are many sounds that you can create with just those two black keys. So I want you to think about that today. Think about it across the week. And then don't forget to join us over at the C Major Radio Show, because we're going to give you a clear picture of how it all looks and how to write it down. But just for a fun music exercise, think about how you would play your two black keys. How can you form a pattern? For instance, this would be a pattern. Kind of a long pattern. I once had a student who really loved to have fun at the piano, and he would say, okay, you know what? I'm going to come up with my own pattern, and then you have to copy me. And then, of course, he would come up with this long thing that he would play, which was almost impossible for me to replicate, but he loved that I would try and would just fall out laughing and just have so much fun at the piano. But you know what? You may discover you can create your own music message or code just by forming your own patterns. So think about the amazing things you can do with just the 2 black keys and have fun with that. Again, thinking about the movement of animals can help you too. If you're thinking about dogs, again, how do dogs move? You can jump off the 2 black keys. You can paw at the 2 black keys. Spring off the keys. That I would say would be more like a cat springing off the keys. If you're a bird, you could fly down the keys. You can make a game out of it to close your eyes and see. If you can remember where you're flying to and back. With your teacher, you can play a pattern. And have fun with it. Also, don't be afraid to improvise and make up your own songs. I mean, talking about minimalism. Not that there's anything about, I don't want to say that minimalism is a funny thing, but I do find it humorous, and some people don't. But if you've ever heard minimalism at the piano, you might be surprised at how complex some of the patterns are. Think about how you can create a march with 2 black keys. Thinking about, again, movement. How graceful can you be moving from what we call octave on the piano, octaves to other octaves. And then after that, I think you can start to think about which fingers you're going to use at the piano to play those black keys. Think about that. I think I've given you a lot to think about in terms of your creativity and how you would think about 2 black keys going forward. I'm going to take a little bit of a music break, and then we're going to come back and give you some more information about 2 black keys, and then we're going to move into our shout outs. You're listening to C Major Before the Show. Thank you so much for tuning in today here on C Major Before the Show. I'm your host, C Major Porter, and it's always a pleasure to be with you. I really like talking with you about music. You know, I saw online earlier this week, there was a question about why you started a podcast. And you've heard me say this before, but it really is because of you, my students. You're the ones who have inspired me to even want to talk about this, and I can't help but talk about it. I feel like I'm bubbling over with so much information to give and share and to have fun with. So thank you to my students, and applause and shout out to you. Again, thank you so much. And so one thing we haven't dealt with today, we haven't dealt with pitch at all. So we won't talk about fixed sounds so much today. But what I want to do is just encourage you to find a way to play on the keyboard these two black keys we've been talking about. Experience the sound of them, the high sounds, the low sounds, and so forth. And so you're going to find there's another group too, but we'll talk about that group next week. But just really start to study the design of it. And then later on in another episode, we'll talk about how to use those black keys to help you label the white keys. So that's some food for thought. But right now, we're going to move into our shout outs and talking about what's going on with us, what's going on with you, because we're still trying to keep safe during COVID-19. It's a difficult time, isn't it? It really is. And I think it's something that we have to talk about on this podcast because it's happening to all of us. So while you're trying to get back to your normal way of living and learn the new normal way of living, I just encourage you to make music a part of that. I think that for me, keeping well has been listening to a lot of music, playing music along with my students in our distance learning program, and not forgetting that music is there to help you. And so I can't even explain why dance music, disco music was the music of choice for this time, but it turned out that it was. And it really made me start to realize how much that music had influenced me growing up. So as much as I was learning to play piano formally, learning all of the classics, never playing this music on a keyboard, except when I found a piece of sheet music that I thought I could read. And even then, you play the sheet music and then you realize it's going to take more than just the sheet music on piano to make this song sound the way that it sounds on the recording. So I ended up listening a lot more than I did trying to replicate any of the songs that I heard on the radio. But listening back to it gave me so much joy and energy, and I was surprised. I chose that music over classical music to listen to, and any other music for that matter. So when I want to hear something upbeat and uplifting, I tend to put on disco for some reason. And that really surprised me. I would say that after that, I would tend to listen to maybe some music that I used to accompany when I was a pianist growing up in Mississippi and having to play for church and community functions. So a lot of that music that I did play was church music or gospel music. And it wasn't until much later that I really got into a lot of the upbeat gospel that you hear on recordings. So it really did depend on where I grew up, a lot of what was written that was published out there. But I said all that to say that sometimes when you're dealing with difficult times, music can be there to kind of rescue you from thinking about those times. And so, what has it been for you? I'm curious. I want to know. You can always get in touch with us online. We're available on social media, and we want to hear from you. We really do. Shout out to my students that are studying online. Let's give you an applause. I want you to know it's a challenging and difficult thing that you're doing. Not everybody gets to do that. Not everybody can stand to do that. And that study online is very different than when you're in person. I think what makes it so different is the fact that you have to be alert. You have somebody in front of you. And so you're expected to pay attention to them. They're expected to pay attention to you. It's constant dialogue, constant engagement. Your eyes tend to drift around to see what their background is looking like and what yours is looking like. And yes, it can be humorous, because if you've never seen what somebody's background looks like and they don't have it blocked, then you might be surprised. Oh, so that's what their background looks like. But shout out to also the marketing teams. I really want to give a very special shout out to the marketing teams at Meathook, at Tone Row, and Spreaker. Shout out to you guys. And the reason for that, I can see that you guys are really working hard on our behalf to get our names out there, give us a place to really be seen and recognized and noticed, and how we're going to be thought of because of the way that you present your marketing. So I really appreciate that. Congratulations to all of you who have graduated from the Teaching Artist program. I might have mentioned this last week, but I'm really very excited about the possibilities as we continue to develop ourselves professionally and to go forward in the way that we teach our students. And so I'm so happy to have that dialogue. It was something that I wished for all along, so I'm really, really happy about that. Congrats to all graduates online. And then just another friendly reminder to see us over at the C Major Radio Show, to write down and to draw from today's episode. We're talking about black keys today. And so I already have in mind something that my students drew. They really surprised me with their three-dimensional drawing. It was really, really good. So we'll talk more about that over there. So join us for that. And then I think it's important to recall and remember how keys are arranged, because they can help you name other keys. All keyboards have a mixture of white and black keys, unless they have been painted in other colors. But how often have you seen that? I think I saw someone online who decided to paint the keys on their keyboard in multicolors and so forth, but we all know the standard way to see those would be black and white, because the history of the piano was black and white keys. The white keys were made out of ivory, I think, until the 50s, the mid-50s, I believe. And then the black keys were made from ebony. So imagine that. And I had the fortune of playing on keys that were made from genuine ivory and from ebony wood. And so that's my reason for the Elephants series that I've been focusing on. And we're going to make an announcement about that probably on the next podcast, our Music for Elephants series. So something that is really heartfelt, that I believe my music can be used to serve the cause of helping elephants who may feel traumatized and sad because of their situation. So we'll talk more about that on the next podcast. Think about this week how the black keys are arranged on your keyboard, and how can you start learning piano with just 2 black keys. And surprise, we have a live poll. Yes, I know you're excited about that. I love polls. Listen, let me tell you something. The name of the poll is, how would you describe the groups of 2 black keys on a piano? And then you have choices. You can say, okay, I would describe them the way C major did. I would say 2 black dogs, or 2 black ants, or 2 black cats, or something else. So have fun with it. That's really what I mean. So that will be part of this week's fun music exercise. Now, when we post the poll, I want you to know that it's active, and you can respond by going to pollev.com/Carol Porter. You can text us, Carol Porter 879 to 22333 to join in, and then you can post your responses, and then we're supposed to give you live results, but I know that's something that we are continuing to work on, and so we're going to get better and better and better at it, and having you interact with us live here on the podcast. Next week's class, 3 black keys. Come up with your own name for these and make it fun. Now, I'm going to take a small break, and when I come back, we're going to end our podcast. Back in a moment. Thank you so much for tuning in today. You've been listening to C Major Before the Show. I'm your host, C Major Porter. We've been talking about black keys, and I wanted to end today's podcast episode. Unfortunately, I wanted to end on a sad note. Now, that sound used to be our homework sound, and now we've kind of moved into the fun music exercise, but I'm being a little dramatic, but it really is a sad note for us here in the music world. It seems like we've lost so many musicians during COVID-19. And so this is just another one to add to the list. Legendary rock and roll musician Little Richard has died. He was known for his energized performances at the piano. And what we'll do is post a video on our Facebook page a little bit later to remember him and his legacy. But I just want to acknowledge his passing and to also acknowledge his contribution to piano playing. So in the meantime, stay safe, be well, take care of yourself, and make the best music you can make. I'll see you next week.